just a few days on, reflections, opportunity lost or a good draw in the end last weekend?
As I said, post-game really, mixed. If you'd have said at half-time that was going to be the outcome, I'd have been disappointed. If you'd have said with 7 minutes to go that was going to be the outcome, I'd have been delighted. So, I think we certainly conspired a little bit to our own downfall, which was disappointing. But you've got to give them a bit of credit too. So from that point of view, look at what we can control, look what we need to do better. Can we stretch out that 40-minute performance into the second half and take control of the things we can control, basically, is the short answer. So, yeah, tough to go down there, as we know. And as we found out last year, every point is precious. So that extra point could prove vital later on.
Your captain looked good at face value over his first game for 15 months. Did he look even better when you looked at the game again, Toby?
Yeah, I obviously played well. He's you don't become a bad player overnight or over 12 months. You're a little bit rusty, and he's the first to admit that he's a little bit rusty. But the more he's out there, the better he'll get. And as you say, there was a lot of good things that were centred around him. But across the piece, if you look at the end of that game, to and probably typifies, excuse the pun, I'm not sure that is a pun, but typifies that sort of attitude of what an Ospreys player looks like. And to defend 25 phases in your own 22 and then progress up the pitch in the next 3 minutes to score, and then Jack to nail that conversion, I think is a good reflection of the sort of people that we want. And as you say, our captain is certainly a person who leads from the front in that aspect.
Any bumps and bruises? Anybody unavailable from last weekend, Toby?
Yeah, well, so we've got a couple of HIAs, as you saw in the game, and obviously the new protocol mean that they're unavailable, as it were. So Owen Watkin and Gareth Anscombe will miss out around that. So we need to make sure we look after people. So from that point of view, those two will miss out. And as a result, everyone else is pretty bumped up, as first games normally are. But yeah, we trained well today, so apart from that, we should be okay.
Anybody back there, just to find a bit of housekeeping in terms of Alex Cuthbert, Dan Lydiot? I think Gareth Thomas obviously pulled out late, and Sam Parry weren't involved from the international squad. How are they?
Lids is fine. The other boys are still working their way back. So yeah, that's the only one person that's available for selection.
I forgot to ask you, how was Gareth Thomas? He was late withdrawal.
Yeah, he's all right. He just felt it in training. We gave him to the game to see how it was. He's a big player for us. With strength in depth is important. And while we have obviously Nicky and Garin and Reece Henry behind him, there's no point in risking a hamstring type injury when you don't have to, because you want people to be back, and I'm on record of saying we want people to get back and stay back, not back and risk. So from that point of view, we just need to be pragmatic around that, and he's ready when he's ready, but it won't be too long.
Okay. You've got a gap at 13 now, Toby, but you've got quite a bit of depth at centre. You've got quite a few young centres there, yep. Established players as well. You've also got George North, who's played on the wing on the weekend.
Sure.
What are you looking to do with George? Because obviously he's played a bit in the centre for Wales. He's played on the wing for you. What's his sort of role this season for you?
Yeah, George is comfortable in both spaces. We've had a conversation. We have a conversation with Wayne where he sees him. We've had a conversation where we see him. And for us, it's not necessarily position. It's about balance, about what's around him. From that point of view, and where he can have influence. The one thing that we want to try and be less fastidious about is probably the shirt numbers. We're trying to get into being good rugby players and best people, best roles, rather than being set in, a 13 does this, a 12 does this, a winger does this, a 6 does this, a 7 does this, an 8 does this. And, I think modern rugby players, there's a lot of transferability, if you like, and adaptability required, even if it's from a bench point of view to cover. So, look, we see George as someone who can play in both positions, and we see him that he will play in both positions, at times. And it also depends on what else you've got to select from, and you want your best players on the pitch. So from that point of view, it gives us that luxury, which is great.
And Jack Walsh, to start at 10. Pretty good audition last weekend, wasn't it, to show what he can do?
Yeah, again, he's gone well. Steve Myler's back in training as well, which is good. So that's helpful. Exciting player while we bought him here, and I'm sure a few eyebrows were raised when, like, who is this guy? And if you add that to his Northampton performance in pre-season, he's got a lot of talent, and that's the exciting thing. And exciting because we're trying to, as we spoke about last week, improve our try scoring count, because that's going to be important. So he looks like a guy who can do that, which is exciting.
The Lions, Toby, not a great record against the South African sides last season for yourselves. That's something you've got an early chance to play a South African side. What have you made of them so far?
Well, I don't think we're alone in that record either. So from that point of view, look, we know that you've got to adapt and learn, and that's the sign of a good side. We've had one season where we've been exposed to South African teams, and we've got a greater understanding firsthand now of what that looks and feels like. So yeah, we need to make sure that we'll see how much we've learnt those lessons come Saturday. So we know what's coming. It's just whether you're good enough to deal with it.
Very well for me. Nice to be back home on the weekend. First home game.
Yeah, no, really looking forward to that. It's been a while, and your first home game is always special, and it'd be great to see a lot of people come out and watch us, hopefully, because as we've seen previously at the end of last year, it really makes a difference. So hopefully people will come out and we can give them something to cheer about.
Toby, what did you learn against the South African teams last season?
A little bit like we learnt last week. If you kick poorly, you're going to pay a big price, for one. That's fairly obvious. And if you look at the type of athletes that they have, the pace on the game, if you let people dictate the pace of the game, you're also going to be up against it. So those are two really big things. Of course, the physicality, the breakdown physicality, the set piece is a massive part of the South African franchises. So as a result, we're going to need, we pride ourselves a little bit in set pieces, and are good there. You saw that at the weekend and how we got ourselves back into the game. So yeah, that's the real big challenge for us, and I think that they're very consistent in that area, and that's the real those areas are ones that we've got to be certainly mindful of and try and edge those contests.
So last week, what were the big pluses? You mentioned the set piece there, and in the first half, your set piece was really good. Your scrum. Could you say a few words about that and other pluses that you spotted?
Well, I think in the first half, everyone will be very, we looked quite comfortable and we were very clean. Very clean and effective, and I think that we were efficient, and that's probably the way I would describe it. And through that efficiency, we stressed people really well. In the second half, we weren't as efficient or clean. We kicked off the back foot. We were probably a little bit conservative. We fell into a game that they wanted to play, whereas we didn't consistently carry on doing what would got us to that position. So there's a mental element to it about taking pride in that aspect. But the good thing, as I said, was the character. The defence, I thought, on the whole was good. There's a few, obviously, like there is in every game, missed tackles. But in relation to, from an organisational point of view, we were good. Forced the turnover after 25 phases, and then to work your way up the pitch through set piece and get yourself in a position to get something extra from the game was really encouraging.
And Jack Morgan had a good game, as always, really. So he played quite well.
Yeah, obviously you've spoken about Jack Morgan. We've got a lot of strength in depth. You talked about Dan Lydiate. Will Griff has played in there. Morgan Morris has been very, very good for us in those positions. So, yeah, you want strength in depth for sure. Because the one thing that in this block one, we're playing, a number of games in quick succession. We've got an international window to be mindful of at the end of it. And we want to basically have a look at people and keep people engaged in that competition for places. So, yeah, back row is definitely a position that I think Tips mentioned it last week. That's very competitive, and long may it remain so.
Is Ethan Roots fit?
Yeah, Ethan's fit. Yep.
Yeah. And presumably you'd be chuffed to have Dan Lydiate back in the mix then. after seeing what he did for Wales against South African opposition in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've taken an individual approach. You've seen some of our international boys come back straight away. Some boys come on the bench. Some people not be involved. Some people not ready to be involved. So it's done on an individual basis, and we were afforded that luxury to be a little bit more time sensitive around him, and he required that time. But to have him chomping at the bit and ready to go is exciting.
So at hooker, Dowie was on the bench and Scott started. What was the thinking there? Do you think that strategy worked? Scott pulled off 3 turnovers and Dowie made an impact. So do you think it worked?
Yeah, well, on that alone, you would suggest that we do. Obviously there's a requirement from a set piece point. If you've got a good set piece team, which we believe we have, you need obviously people that can deliver their functional role first and foremost. And we've got those two. We've got Sam Perry. We've got Elvis. We've got a lot of strength in those positions in set piece hooker, and also their influence outside of that. And you mentioned the 3 turnovers. You've mentioned that Dowie got a critical turnover, and that's how we get better. We get better by having pressure on each other to perform well, and then you can't rest on your laurels, and we maintain a standard of performance that makes us competitive. And I know coaches always hate those selection conversations, but if you've got a competition for places, whether you like the confrontation or not, ultimately you're going to keep an output because that everyone has to maintain an effort, and that's exciting for all of us.
What guides your selection, Toby? Is it merit every week? Is it horses for courses? Particularly at hooker, I'm thinking. You've just mentioned you've got 4 really good hookers there.
I think early in the season it's about where they are, and also giving people opportunity from that point of view. And as the season progresses, you realise that who you can pick a little bit more on form. There's no divine right, there never is, and we strongly believe in that. And ultimately, it's about what you deliver, both in training and in playing. But at this early part of the season, it's about getting people up to a level where they can be the best versions of themselves. So from that point of view, it is a balancing act at the moment. Sam Parry's not available for us currently, so that takes one out of the mix. But he will be soon. So from that point of view, they need to keep pushing each other. But it really depends on an individual basis where we are in the season and what they've produced to that point.
Because you mentioned those 3 Welsh hookers there, presumably, including Scott Baldwin, all will have ambitions, at a national level this season.
Oh, without doubt, and that's important as well. So, yeah, we'll. I'm sure that you'll get to see those boys throughout these 6, 7, 8 games early in the season, and from that, the international coaches can make their choices.
And just last question, really, from me: have you noticed over the last year big progression in Dowie's game?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously, by international recognition alone, you've seen him come play a very instrumental part in the Six Nations. You've seen him play, come off the bench and influence games. And obviously the thing that is progressing is obviously his set piece consistency. He's a very, very good player. He's a player that we're really pleased to have. He's a long-term, I think he'll potentially be a long-term captain of this club at some point. So from that point of view, yeah, he's one of those players going forward that we'll be building a team around, and he's very excited, very committed, and along with those other boys, means that the future's bright for us in that position.
I mean, you mentioned his leadership. Jonathan Davis, Jiffy, has sort of touted him as potentially a Wales captain of the future. That's not inconceivable, is it? I wouldn't have thought.
I think Adam Beard might have something to say about that, but no, No, we are trying to develop a lead, like a lot of regions or a lot of clubs. We work very hard at the off-field stuff around cultural and leadership and bits and pieces. We're very deliberate about that and where the program's constructed. And yeah, we expect people to develop in that side, and people like Dowie, Adam Beard, and we've got some recognised leaders that we've already mentioned. you know, to learn from, as well as providing the support in order for them to get to lead, lead as well as play. So I think that, as you said, whether he captains Wales, that's probably out of my remit. But do I see him playing a leadership role for us? Certainly do, going forward without doubt.